you guys might have noticed we have guests this week. Let me introduce them first, because what we have right now, right in front of me, is a special guest. This person is indisputably, verifiably, the fastest person ever to appear on Bring It In with Morgan Campbell. He's even faster than like I thought I was as a younger man. 10.22 in the 100 meters. Also a two-season Olympian. Headed to Beijing as an athlete, mentor with Team Canada, also running for one of Canada's 2 open positions on the IOC Athletes Commission with sustainability as his platform. Seyi Smith in Ottawa, how are we doing?
Good morning. I'm doing really well, Morgan. Thanks for the invite.
Okay, perfect. And also joining us from Port Elgin, senior editor at Tree Hugger magazine, who's going to talk to us a little bit more about the Olympics and sustainability. Katherine Martinko, how are we doing?
Hi, Morgan. Thanks for having me.
Okay, well, I think a lot of our viewers are wondering, well, why do we have these two guests? In addition to the fact that it's the official Bring It In with Morgan Campbell Winter Olympic preview, but recently, Katherine, you wrote this fascinating feature on why the Winter Olympics are taking place in a location that does not have real snow. So get our readers caught up, because a lot of people are going to watch skiing, freestyle skiing, ski jumping, and just see snow on camera and think this is normal. But in fact, this is highly abnormal for this part of the world. Explain.
Hi, yeah. Well, I wrote that piece because I was reading that Beijing is one of the few places that is going to be relying on 100% fake snow for all of its alpine events. And in light of the global climate concerns that we have these days, that struck me as a little bit absurd. It does take an awful lot of energy and water to create all of that snow for these events. So I think it's just something that we need to be thinking about in greater depth.
Right. And so for me, it's what your statistics say is 49 million gallons of water to make all this snow. And that's it's a hard figure for people to wrap their minds around. It's such a big figure. Like, I am one of these gallon a day fitness bros. Like, I walk around with my big jug, and I did a little bit of math. It would take me 134,000 years to drink all that water. But are there ways to quantify and contextualize just how much water is going into making this artificial snow?
Well, I don't think anyone's really thinking of it in terms of drinking water. That's
right.
that's definitely hard to conceptualize. But we could compare it to Sochi. So Sochi did the same thing. They made a lot of artificial snow for their events, and they were using the equivalent of an Olympic swimming pool worth of water every hour to produce enough snow to cover an area that was roughly the size of 1,000 football fields. So it's a lot of water that's getting turned into snow.
Katherine, explain for our viewers and for our listeners, though, like, why this is a big deal. Like, people, like where I live, we live next to the lake. There's water everywhere. There's rivers. Like, why does it matter that this is artificial snow that winds up on the mountainside as opposed to fake snow, as opposed to real snow?
Well, yeah, no, there's a number of issues. So first of all, Beijing is considered to be a water-stressed area. So according to the United Nations, it is a country that is below the threshold it's considered to be adequate amounts of water for its urban residents. So to take that water, especially during winter and at peak tourist season, when there's a lot of other demands for water at the same time, it adds stress to a place that's already struggling a bit with it. Energy is another issue. It requires incredible amounts of energy to operate. I believe they have about 100 snow generators and 300 snow guns in operation to create all this fake snow. So there's the energy side of things, and then that creates a lot of noise. The guns and the cannons are operating at around 60 to 80 decibels per cannon, and that creates some issues for wildlife disruption in the mountains in the area. All of this added snow too ends up melting. So it melts about 2 to 3 weeks after regular snow does because of its icier consistency. And there are compounds that are added to the water to prevent it from melting at the higher outdoor temperatures. And this can lead to erosion, and it can also lead to soil contamination, which can affect plants and the natural ground cover that comes in the spring once this is all melted. So it's not just a matter of making the snow. There's actually some lasting effects that happen from it.
So now, Seyi, as Katherine pointed out a minute ago, this was also an issue in Sochi in 2014, this reliance on fake snow, on human-made snow. So this is an issue, obviously, that's going to follow the Winter Olympics from cycle to cycle to cycle. So now, if you wind up on the Athletes Commission with sustainability as your platform, like, what type of impact, like, do you hope to be able to make on this front?
Yeah, I think there was actually some studies that came out, one from Waterloo, that said in a couple decades or so, there's only going to be one city of the last, I think, 10 cities that hosted the Winter Games that can host a Winter Games under changing climate. So what Katherine has described could be the norm unless, we as humanity sort of get our act together. So for me, my aim when we get in there is just to help sort of be more tactical in terms of what the IOCs and the UN Sports for Climate Action Framework, what their long-term goals are pointing to. Because if you go on the website, they say, we're going to make templates for International Sports Federation. We're going to be climate positive by 2030. We're going to make sure that our transportation comes down X%, which is great. It's great they have those goals, but I want to be a leading figure from the athlete's perspective in saying, what exactly will that mean? For the bobsled athletes, does that mean that they can't travel 7 or 8 times? Or for downhill skiers, does that mean that they have to sort of get their kit from one type of clothing company compared to the other one? I just want to make it real for athletes and then communicate to the athletes saying, okay, this is very important to all of you. This is what it actually means for us in our day to day, and here are the sort of the decisions we have to make. That's my main aim, to make athletes up front and make it real.
Now, in the conversations you've had with athletes so far, like how plugged in are they to the importance of sustainability from games to games?
I say there's 2 types of athletes. They're the ones that are the diehard fans, the ones that are biking everywhere, and not eating meat, and they're the ones that are at the forefront on social media. But I couldn't give you a number, what percentage they are, but they're a sizable bunch. Mm-hmm. But for the rest, when I speak to them, everyone finds this important. I said, yeah, this means a lot to me. But then the next thing is, but how do I sort of balance how important this is with, this is my job, I have to perform well, I have to travel. Mm-hmm. So I would say every athlete's involved. It's just, I think the majority are trying to figure out, what can I do? Give me some steps that I can do in my sport, in my corner, to sort of at least do my part without completely jeopardizing my income. That's the basic thought process right now.
Right. And it is one thing to tell like individuals to conserve, but like, I don't know how many shorter showers I have to take and how many times I have to like skip washing the car to save 49 million gallons worth of water. So Seyi, I'm going to ask you first, like what type of broader systemic fundamental changes would have to take place in order to make these games more sustainable?
I totally agree. We can't put all the onus on individuals. The systemic changes would need to come from the IOC and the international federations and national Olympic committees. If I were there, I would suggest that the first thing is measuring, putting a requirement for all international sport organizations to measure their impacts. However you want to, like carbon dioxide equivalent emissions, travel emissions, the waste. We have to know exactly what we're sort of putting out there. And then I would say collectively, the IOC would need to make, because they have agreed that by 2030 that the Olympic Games are going to be climate positive, meaning that they're going to absorb more emissions than they put out at the games. But I would say that systemically in the entire sports sector, we would need, even at the grassroots level, to say, clubs, this is how much carbon dioxide emissions you can emit in a year. International federations, this is how much you can emit in a year. We have to set like actual goals and then have third-party experts hold the entire sports sector accountable. Every other sector is trying to do the same thing, and I don't think we can just be in the shadows.
Okay, perfect. And Katherine, for you, because this like treehugger.com, the environment is your thing. And so what ways, again, it's one thing to tell individuals, save water at home. Okay, cool. But like in terms of the Olympics, what steps would you like to see the IOC and these various host organizing local organizing committees, what steps would you like to see them take to cut their carbon footprint and to create a more sustainable Olympic program?
Great question. Well, I would say if I were the IOC, I would limit Winter Olympic host city contenders to those whose climates naturally reflect the sports that they're hosting. I think that that's what the athletes deserve because those are going to be the optimal conditions. If you're hosting the Olympics in cities that get lots of natural snowfall and cold temperatures that are going to maintain those conditions predictably and reliably for the Olympics, the Winter Olympics every single winter. So I think that the IOC also has to make it easier and a bit more appealing for some of those cities to want to host. I think that that's a bit of an issue. It's so expensive. It's so much work. And you have a lot of cities dropping out of the running for these games. The only other city that was in the running against Beijing was Almaty, Kazakhstan, and it does get a lot of snow, but for political reasons, obviously, it's probably good that it's not hosting this year. But that's something that the IOC should consider. And I would even propose choosing a permanent base, select a place in a northern climate that has lots of snow and make that the place where everyone goes for the Winter Olympics every 4 years. So that would also spare host cities from having to build new venues every 4 years, which is incredibly wasteful from an environmental standpoint. So a place like Lillehammer or Whistler or, I don't know, another city with lots and lots of snow, I think could potentially become a permanent base.
Like Port Elgin. Lots of snow. No, and while we have you here, because you know about snow because you live in Port Elgin, comes down sideways, as you told me. From a competitive standpoint, because again, you might have people watching this and listening to it saying, well, snow is snow. But like from a competitive standpoint, for the skiers, for the ski jumpers, for the snowboarders, what is the difference between natural snow or mostly natural snow and an entire run made of human-made snow?
I have heard mixed reports, so maybe Seyi can respond to this more accurately than I can. But I did reach out to Alpine Canada, and they said they didn't have any concerns about the fact that the Beijing runs were made out of fake snow because they're used to training on that now. I do think, though, that a lot of the mountains here are natural snow based that are then supplemented with artificial snow, so it's more of a mix. There was an embargoed study that's coming out shortly that did allude to the fact that there are some concerns about entire runs made of fake snow that could be causing future risks to athletes the faster and icier things get.
Right. Well, also, just off the top of my head, like if you make artificial snow and it's 0 degrees Celsius, that's one thing. If you make artificial snow and it's 5 degrees Celsius, that's something different. Anyone who has shoveled snow can tell you how different the snow looks and feels when it's cold versus when it's starting to melt. Last word to you, Seyi. 2 or 3 Olympic cycles from now, how would you, like in a perfect world, how would you like all of this to look from a sustainability standpoint?
My background's in engineering, so I like numbers and like quantifying things. Yeah, to me, 2 cycles from now in a perfect world, every Olympic sport would have a dashboard on their website showing exactly how much they're traveling, what the carbon dioxide equivalent emissions are, how much waste they're producing. And, they'd be able to sort of sign on to some kind of procurement strategy saying that up and down their entire supply chain, they're being sourced by, Patagonia style vendors and manufacturers. I would love for us to know 100% what we see is true and it's validated. And then it just becomes a question of reducing that ceiling down as far as we need to sort of get the results we want. It's a numbers game, and I want to see some solid numbers. I'm sure Katherine can point us in the direction where we can get those numbers too someday too.
All right, the regular panelists are back in their place, looking at us from Washington, D.C., sports editor of The Nation, author of 11 books, most recent, The Kaepernick Effect. Dave Zirin, how we doing?
Doing well. Great to be here.
Right. Also in Washington, D.C., a native of Hamilton, Ontario, and also the hardest working woman in sports media. She just told us is either 6 games in 7 days or 7 games in 6 days, which could happen because she covers multiple teams, but she still made time to be with us. Megan, feed the algorithm, McPeak.
How's it going, guys?
It's going really well. And Megan is actually the luckiest among us because she was telling us like she didn't even have time Saturday night to watch football because she was cramming for all this basketball. So she didn't have to worry about whether the quarterback people are calling QAnon Rodgers was going to make the Super Bowl to bombard us with more COVID misinfo because she was deep in the books. But this week we got a lot going on. This is actually the official Bring It In Beijing Winter Olympics preview. So it's all winter sports heavy. Megan found time to study some of that too. So this is good. we are going to make it happen. But before we do that, welcome back again, audience. And if you're new here, or if you are a regular here and haven't done this yet, make sure you like this episode, subscribe to CBC Sports YouTube channel, leave a comment, hit us up on social media using the Bring It In hashtag. All engagements matter. Why is that, Megan?
Because of course we feed the algorithm.
Right. The algorithm is as hungry for engagement as the desert mountain slopes outside Beijing are for man-made snow. So Megan, because I think we've discussed this on this show before, right? The logistics of having Winter Olympic events in cities that don't really sustain them in terms of their weather. Is there anything that Katherine or Seyi said that really stood out to you?
I think just when you hear the actual numbers with regards to how much snow they have to create and how much water is needed to be able to make that, while we're in a global pandemic, people in Michigan are still dealing with water issues. People around the world are dealing with water and hunger issues. And there's this whole thing called climate change that nobody wants to talk about or listen to people that actually know what they're talking about talk about. So, the fact that they're having to use all of this water to create fake snow in order to host the Olympics, and then you hear it in the actual numbers, is really jaw-dropping to then see those numbers on paper and realize maybe we probably shouldn't be hosting them in a place that actually can't create snow naturally.
Yeah, because there is a big difference between supplementing your snowy hillside with human-made snow and like starting from scratch. And all I could think about was just like the opportunity cost of all that water. Like what else could you be doing with 49 million gallons of water in terms of benefiting the environment or just letting people survive? From? Exactly. As Katherine pointed out, like an already stressed water table and a town with thirsty people, trees that need water to survive, and the trees will at least actually help absorb some of the carbon. And you're saying, no, we need this water for the fake snow. Tree, get your water someplace else. Dave Zirin, what did Seyi or Katherine say that stood out to you?
Well, I mean, what stood out to me, first of all, it was wonderful to hear the discussion with two extremely intelligent people with knowledge about the issue. I enjoyed the discussion greatly. It also felt like people were describing what to me sounded like a crime against humanity with the amount of water that was going to be wasted. And the gap, though, between what is happening to create the Winter Olympics and the kind of solutions that are being offered to keep the Olympic train running just seem very, very piecemeal to me. Like, I don't see how we solve this problem without having a strict policy that says your city can either handle the Winter Olympics or it can't. And if we run out of cities that can't handle the Winter Olympics, then the solution is not wasting 50 kajillion gallons of water. The solution is not having the Winter Olympics. And that would stink because I love the Winter Olympics. I really do. I'm a fan. We'll talk about that more, about what I'm excited about. But at the end of the day, I mean, if humanity screwed up having the Winter Olympics, then humanity screwed up having the Winter Olympics. And you have to be an adult and accept that and figure out how we're going to save the planet and not move forward with plans that only do further damage.
Yeah, if the Winter Olympics have to take place, I don't see a problem with saying Calgary, Norway, a couple other places, you guys handle it, because every other place is liable to become too warm in February to make this thing happen sustainably. Megan McPeak, what do you think of the idea of just having a rotating roster of Winter Olympic cities?
I think that's probably one of the best solutions, because especially if you look at, and I believe it was Katherine who said that, if you're looking at the roster of cities who have previously hosted, they most likely still have the venues that were built in order to host. So to her point of, having cities that have previously hosted, you are then also saving costs on having to build or renovate any buildings in order to host these events, like we've seen over the course of the last couple Summer Olympics too. And then it turns into a ghost town because these venues don't get used for anything. So then you think of all the carbon emissions that were used to create these venues and all the pollution. And now they're just sitting there doing what? Collecting dust. And then if you're already reusing these same venues over and over again, at least there's some sort of resolution to having these built already. So I think it's a great idea, because you don't have to worry about creating this man-made fake snow that you're doing for Beijing, because you can rely on the fact that Mother Nature will do what Mother Nature is supposed to do and bring snow to these climates that would normally have it. Then you are maybe only using half or a quarter of the amount of man-made snow that you would normally use versus Beijing, because you just need it for an extra, layer of snow and an extra layer of built to be able to sustain what Mother Nature is already doing.
This is the question I thought of you, like when I think of the IOC messaging on we want to unite humanity around common blah, 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 make everybody feel good about being human because we're all one global community. But at the same time, abetting this environmental injustice. Like, how do these goals even begin to coexist?
I mean, they don't. And they certainly weren't something that was on the minds of Pierre de Coubertin in 1896 when they launched the modern Olympic Games. But there's always been this contradiction at the heart of the Olympics, because, what else was happening in the world in 1896 when the Olympics start? You have the growth of nationalism and the growth of nation states throughout the world, and the starting of wars, as there was a fight for resources throughout the world, and countries in Europe and the United States started going into the Caribbean and deep into sub-Saharan Africa to plunder. So the Olympics have this contradiction where it's set up ostensibly to bring nations together, but it was also this acknowledgement like, well, we're all competing with each other and we're all at war with one another, and hey, here's an event where we pretend that that's not the natural state of things. Well, fast forward to the 21st century, maybe we're not plundering to who gets to be in charge of the Belgian Congo like we were in the 19th century, but we are still in a battle now over resources. And so the number one resource on Earth is arguably water at this point. Yeah. So there's something,
and with every passing year, there's less and less argument about it. I think.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yes. I'm trying to be expansive and giving to other perspectives with my very sharp perspective that in a lot of ways there's nothing more Olympic than saying we're here to bring the world together while also hastening the decline of the Earth at the same time.
100%. And this is one of the reasons why, like, I know for me myself as a fan, like, I'm excited about the Olympics, but not as excited as I would like to be because of reasons like this. Go ahead, Dave.
Just when Sochi happened, it was warmer than big swaths of Florida. I believe at its height, it got to 63 degrees Fahrenheit. I looked it up as far as what Beijing is today, and I do use the Fahrenheit. I do apologize to my Canadian folks.
I'll try to do a quick conversion, but go ahead.
42 degrees Fahrenheit in Beijing.
About 8 Celsius, 7 or 8 Celsius.
Yeah, it's running an Olympics in that kind of climate, and a Winter Olympics, I should say, in that kind of climate is, I would argue, a recipe for injury. So it's anti-athlete. Yes. And it's also, as we've discussed at length, I think it's environmentally, just profoundly irresponsible. And that's from when we start talking about Beijing in general, just having it anywhere that's 42 degrees Fahrenheit, to me, it is a slap in the face to these athletes.
Yeah, it's one thing to train in different types of snow, but do the bulk of these athletes train in that type of snow when it's 8 degrees Celsius, 6-7 degrees Celsius? Probably not. And it changes the competition in ways that aren't fair. And like you said, Dave, frankly, are not safe. Speaking of safety, the local organizing committee has changed the test threshold for COVID-19 tests, for PCR tests. Now, I'm not a technician on these tests. The measure they use is the cycle threshold value. Before the cycle threshold value, it was 40, and I don't know how big the scale is, so I can't quite quantify 40, but the important number is now that it is 35. So what dropping it from 40 to 35 means is that more people who have negligible amounts of the virus in their body because they had COVID-19 before will continue testing negative, because what was happening before is, on the standards that we accept here in everyday life in Canada, you might score 38 or whatever it is. And that counts as a negative test because they recognize that that's not really the virus being active in your body. But then if you try to go to Beijing, your 38 gets you booted. Now the 35 gets you through the door. Dave Zirin, what are the implications of dropping this threshold in terms of negative tests for the Olympics?
Well, the implications are twofold. I mean, first, it probably will mean that more athletes get to compete. And I think, if you're going, we've had this discussion with other subjects. If you're going to do it, then you might as well do it. And you might as well do it in a way that actually gets the people who've been training to do it to Beijing to perform. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, Beijing is taking a big risk because the COVID rates are low in Beijing. They're having an outbreak right now in Beijing that actually, ironically, they've traced to a Canadian package.
Right. Yes, they said it came in the mail. I'm not sure.
I don't know what to believe.
Color me skeptical, but go ahead.
I don't know what to believe. I don't know if it's true that the great outbreak involves 9 people. And they're very upset about 9 people. 9 people is a fraction of my daughter's high school in terms of who's getting sent home every day for COVID and particularly Omicron variant. So it's like, I don't know what to believe or what not to believe in that regard. I do know that if they're wary about Canadian packages, they're about to get the mother load coming in with the Beijing Olympics in all kinds of human form too. So, I mean, I think it's like you lower the rate so more people can compete. Terrific. Beijing is also doing what Tokyo did, and that's rolling the dice that they're not going to be that the Olympic legacy is not going to involve mass hospitalization.
Yeah, well, listen, I will give them, like the local organizing committee, I will give them credit because when I started thinking about the effect COVID-19 tests would have on this games, my mind went to the worst place of straight-faced, bad faith crookedness, where you look at you look at events where like the home team is on the cusp of the podium, but not quite. And then all of a sudden, all the top 3 contenders, sorry, buddy, positive, go home. Oh, look, home team, gold medal. What a coincidence. That was the place where I went. And I really thought that they were going to start using COVID-19 tests as a reason to keep people out in order to puff up the home team's medal count. So I will give them credit for actually trying to create more of an open level playing field. Megan McPeak, because you've discussed this before, like how easy it is to test positive like weeks after you've had the virus and are no longer infectious, no longer sick, but because you have some of the debris floating around your system, you might trip the positive test. Now, so this changed threshold, what do you think that's going to mean for the games?
I think Dave's right in the sense that it allows more athletes to compete that might not have been able to meet that threshold of 40 prior to it being changed down to 35. But at the same time, like, what does that mean? Like, does that mean that you're no longer going to have to be stuck in like that 21-day quarantine potentially if you get over there after this testing phase to get to Beijing? Because let's say you go through this testing phase and your test before you leave come back negative, everything's good to go, you've met the threshold, then you land and you test positive. What does that mean? What does the quarantine look like? How, like, does this threshold now allow you to avoid being in a 21-day quarantine and completely missing the games? Does this threshold being lower to 35 allow you that if you do test positive, you can only isolate for a certain amount of time and then return as long as your test results after that are 35 or under so that you continue to meet that threshold? That's my concern, is people who get there and then test positive, what does that look like for them, especially the athletes who might get there and have to compete a couple days later, because we don't know what their situation looks like right now leading up to leaving for Beijing. Are they going, purposely with enough time that if they land and test positive, they have a week between their first event and them landing, that they can quarantine for enough time to be able to retest and compete? Like, what are we doing? We don't know what the testing process looks like once you physically are in Beijing. And let's say you test positive during like competition. You're in, I don't know, the second round of snowboarding, trying to get to the podium, and you're currently in 4th place trying to fight to get into, the podium. and all of a sudden it's the morning of competition and you test positive. What does that look like?
Yeah, from a communication standpoint, the one thing we could all benefit from, which nobody with the power seems to want to give us, is a scale.
Straight answer?
Yeah, well, yeah, or just a scale. Like, what do these different values mean? Like, give me a denominator. 35 out of what? 40 out of what? What's the denominator? Okay, if we're talking about a 100-point scale, show me that, and then show me what these different values, what typically happens. What is typically happen? Like, what value on this scale does someone typically register when they are like infectious? What value do they typically register when they're just feeling really crappy? And then we can see what a 35 or a 40 means. So if an 80 means that I'm shedding virus, I'm sick, I'm making other people sick, that means one thing. But then if you tell me that 35 and 40 means literally we've never seen anyone with a 35 or a 40 infect anyone else, we've never seen anyone with a 35 or a 40 even sniffle, then we know what that means. But right now, these are just numbers, and the people putting these numbers out, and then also we in the mainstream media are very, 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 very bad at contextualizing these things. So the numbers sort of mean something, and they sort of give us some clarity, but they wind up raising more questions than they answer because they don't have context. Dave, you're going to say something.
No. Just that how much I agree with what you're saying here. It's like there's so much that we don't know in terms of how this is going to be processed. And let's say it, there's a real lack of trust. And it's the lack of trust is not just with Beijing and the Chinese government, it's with the IOC as well. So being able to compute what actually will constitute a safe Winter Olympics and make things safe, not just for the athletes, but for the people of Beijing, it becomes very, very difficult to decipher.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Because again, if I'm just a person from Beijing who gets a job working at the Olympics, like I signed up for this job, I did not sign up to risk my life, risk my health, risk my family's health. So it would help everyone, to have like concrete information. What are these ranges? What value does somebody give off on these tests when they're sick? What value do they give off when they are infectious? But we still don't know that. So stay tuned. Maybe in the next couple of weeks, we might get some context. Maybe not. We might still be flying blind. Okay, I'm getting the stick to sports call in my ear because we are talking the Winter Olympics. So these games are going to go on as far as we know. So my question to you, Dave Zirin, we're going to go up and down the panel. My question to you, Dave Zirin, is which event or events in Beijing are you most looking forward to seeing?
Well, I just did a story about a guy named Akwazi Frimpong who's attempting to become the representative from the entire continent of Africa. He hails from Ghana to compete in a sport called skeleton. And in the process of interviewing Akwazi and speaking about his journey, I found myself on YouTube watching a lot of skeleton. And for those who don't know what skeleton is, it feels like it's like luge for thrill addicts. I mean, it's like luge.
Because wait, because regular luge is not thrilling enough.
Yes, that's the point. Like for people for whom luge is a little bit slow and sleepy, you do skeleton. Which is, and for folks who don't know, like imagine the luge, but now imagine lying on your stomach.
Wait, with a running start.
With a running start.
You got to pull yourself out of the gate. Skeleton, you're at a full sprint pushing the sled and you just jump on.
And Akwazi Frimpong was only once one of the great sprinters in all the Netherlands as well. He went to the Netherlands at age 8, undocumented, to reunite with his mother. I mean, an unbelievable story. And the struggle is ongoing because the IOC is saying, well, we don't know if you can compete in these races, which goes against another IOC dictate about having continents represented in the games. And he would be the African representative. So it's a whole battle there. But I'm just excited now to see the skeleton because I've looked up who Akwazi Frimpong's competition would be and how they operate. And before I know it, it's like, all right, fine, NFL playoffs, that's good and all, but the skeleton is coming.
You know who would be really good at the skeleton? Which baseball Hall of Famer would be an incredible skeleton pilot? It's only one right answer.
Ricky Henderson?
Of course.
Did I get it?
Yes.
All right.
You start low, you run low, you dive head first, and you slide. It's just a longer slide. It's like stealing third base, except the slide lasts for 90 seconds instead of, a quarter of a second. This is Ricky Henderson's event, but I think he made the right choice. Megan McPeak, which Winter Olympic event or events are you looking forward to?
Let me take myself off mute because, we're almost 3 years into this thing and we still haven't figured that out, Megan. Come on.
You're the hardest working person. It's just that your mute thumb was tired from all this studying. It's okay.
I think the easy answer for me is always figure skating because you're on this thin blade of sharpness, and the wrong timing can be very destructive. But the biathlon, I think, is a sleeper event because you're mixing cross-country skiing and target practice.
Yes.
And it's to the point where, you get your heart rate up from the cross-country skiing, okay? Your heart rate's up. These people probably got it anywhere from 80 to 120, maybe even higher than that, but they're also elite athletes. So I'm thinking because their resting heart rate is probably 25,
yeah, exactly.
80 to 120 is a very high heart rate for them.
Exactly.
And then in literally split seconds, under 3 seconds, you have to crouch down, find your target, have your heart rate drop below 60 to hit the target to then get up and go again. If that's not elite athlete at the epitome, I don't know what is.
And doing all that skiing,
and your arms are tired from the cross country skiing, and then you got to hold the rifle. That's just impressive.
You also have to ski with the rifle strapped to your back.
On your back.
Yeah,
and make sure you keep the safety on just in case. We don't need any accidents.
Right. The lung size of these people. These are the people you want when you have a little kid's birthday party and you need someone to blow up all the balloons.
The helium doesn't work.
Get the biathlete. Or
and they're all to your point, they're all super slim and slender, but in clearly phenomenal shape.
Yeah, they're all lungs and legs, sort of like a marathon runner. They're also now that I'm getting up there in age, if people want to put a candle for every year of my birthday, I can't get them all in one blow, but the biathlete, one shot, half a breath, and still have enough to blow up all the balloons. But that's.
And it's not a short course, if I'm not mistaken, too.
No,
it's not it's 500 meters. It's long.
Yeah, and you got to keep doing it. Listen, man. So my favorite Olympic sport is at the other end of the power endurance spectrum. I like long track, short distance speed skating. So I like the 10,000 in speed skating. That's cool. But the 500 and the 1,000 are my favorites because what I like to see in these characteristics cut across sports, cut across genders. I want to see a really powerful muscle bound person put all of their effort into something that does not take very long just to see how much power they can put out. And the fact that the speed skaters got to transmit all that power through these little skinny skate blades onto the ice without falling down, without crashing, is super intriguing to me. The only thing that would make it better is if they took it off of the curved track and put 500 meters or 1,000 meters in a straight line to see how fast they could really go. So I'm looking forward to that. Erin Jackson, I think Megan referenced her the other week. She was the American who stumbled in trials and wound up finishing third. But only top two go, except Erin Jackson in real life overall is one of the top 2 500 meter skaters in the entire world. So her teammate, who was also qualified in another event, said, well, I will vacate my spot. You take this spot because you in real life, you're better at the 500 meters than I am. And now we have 2 medal threats instead of 1. But yeah, the long track, short distance speed skating is my number 1 Winter Olympic event, followed very closely by the bobsled for the same reason, because I like watching all these strong, powerful people get that bobsled up to speed and then jump in like it's a clown car and ride that track. It's like speed skating meets sprinting meets Dave's favorite event, the skeleton, all in one.
I don't know how they get their bodies. It's just bloom, 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 bloom. It's literally just bloom.
Oh yeah, into the.
It's just beautiful.
Yeah, I have no clue. And the thing is, bobsledders for the most part are not small people.
No.
But the size of the car does not change. These are 220-pound guys. They're former running backs, former linebackers like this. But hopping into that sled.
Future President Herschel Walker was a boss.
Him too. Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Not a small person.
Not a small person at all. And he's actually able to fit his ego and sense of entitlement into that sled as well, which is the biggest accomplishment. Okay. So Dave is all in on the skeleton. Megan's all in on biathlon. I'm all the way in on speed skating. So I might have to adjust my sleep schedule a little bit to make this happen, but we'll make it work. All right. We're at my favorite part of the week. In or out. We got 2 questions teed up. We're going to find out if David and Megan are in or out. First up, men's hockey. The NHL was going to send a bunch of players. Now they're not sending a bunch of players because their schedule's off. And plus, they didn't really want to go anyway because a lot of people were really wary of a potential positive test in a quarantine that would knock, key players out for a key part of the regular season. So the NHL teams are not sending players. So all these teams are going to have to put together, all these countries are going to have to put together teams that don't include NHL players. China's roster is not affected because they don't have any NHL players. And for a long time, it was a question of whether China's men's team would even get to play because their men's team is not very good at hockey. Like, it's a new sport from the Chinese sports culture perspective. Not a lot of people play it. Not a very high skill level, even amongst their best players. So in these pre-Olympic exhibitions, they were getting washed every week, but somehow still wound up in a tournament. Said all that to say this: Team China is in a pool with Canada in the US, which with NHL players, we're talking probably a triple-digit aggregate goal deficit at the end of round robin. Like, if you think this brand new team is going to stop Connor McDavid, they're not. But it's a new day because you can't send NHL players. So my question to you, Dave, are you in or out on China scoring a single goal in either game against Canada and the US in the Olympics?
China's a country of well over 1 billion people. When they got the Olympics, the Winter Games, there were roughly 500 hockey players in the entire country. Out of over 1 billion people, there were hundreds of hockey players. And when I say hundreds of hockey players, I don't mean professional hockey players. I mean people who chose to put on skates, pick up a stick, and play hockey. In other words, they're basically a neighborhood in Detroit. The number of people who played hockey. Now, after they got the Olympics, they did what China does, which is they invested millions upon millions of dollars in developing players in short order, building hockey rinks overnight, attempting to build a team. But the problem is that to be on the Chinese Olympic team, you have to be a Chinese citizen, and they don't allow dual citizenship. So a lot of the players they've brought over to teach and to play are now not eligible. And that's a long way of saying, no, they will not score a goal. And I think it's great they're there. I like rules that say, hey, if you're hosting the Olympics or the World Cup for that matter, get your team on out there. Go for it. Give it your best shot. But you know what? They're not scoring a goal.
Also, learn to exploit dual citizenship. Like when you watch the Rugby League World Cup in Lebanon and Serbia have teams, or in Italy, like, are all those teams full of players who grew up in those countries? No, they're people from Australia, and their parents are from those countries, and their grandparents. And this is how you put a team on the field. For all the things that they thought of a way to make 49 million gallons of fake snow, but didn't think, hey, wait a minute. There's a lot of our diasporas in Canada and the US where they play hot. Why don't we just dual citizens? Come on, guys. Megan McPeak, you in or out on China scoring a single goal against
Wayne
Canada
Gretzky
or the US?
Is not walking through that door.
So is that a no?
It's a no.
Yeah, we have unanimity on the panel. I'm all the way out. Like you said,
at
Dave,
this point, they should just be playing. It should just be the US and Canada fighting for who's 1 and 2 to just move on to the next round.
Yes. Absolutely. I think Germany's in their pool. Someone's going to correct me. I want to say Germany's in their pool too. But again, Germany, like, if you don't have our man Leon from the NHL, I forget his last name, from the Oilers, and what are they doing? I don't know. Like, because
the thing, like, Canada and the US are used to playing without NHLers. Like, this isn't a new thing for them.
No, and that second, third tier of Canadian hockey players, American hockey players, is still better than a country that had 500 hockey players a couple weeks ago. So I'm all the way out too. Yeah, Dave, like, I could go on a run and just past my daughter's daycare, there is this huge like frozen section of Lake Ontario where like on the weekend, there are literally hundreds of people out there skating and playing hockey. So I could, on a run around this neighborhood on a cold day, I could find 500 hockey players. Some of them might be good enough to make China's national team. So against Canada and the US, even with third tier pros, China will not score one goal, and they still might give up between those two games 25 to 30 goals.
Listen, if they score a goal against either one of those teams, they need to treat that like a gold medal.
Yep. Absolutely.
Just give them an extra one.
Absolutely. And everybody on that team needs a t-shirt saying that they were on that team so that any place they go in the country for the rest of their lives, they never have to buy another beer because they're like, oh, you're the guy from the team that made it 15 to 1.
You scored the goal.
Yes. There we go. I assisted on the goal. I got the second assist. Listen, 18 to 1. Perfect. All right. Last time out, 2018, Canada finished third on the Winter Olympic medal table. Megan McPeak, you in or out on Canada moving up the ladder?
Isn't there like a standard when it comes to hockey for Canada that it's gold or bust?
I would think so, yes.
So that we're going with that.
Gold or bust?
I'm gonna play my Canadian card on this one and go with the hockey folks, and it's gold or bust. So
you think Canada's going to finish better than third on the medal table?
Yes.
All right.
They have no choice.
That's a hot take, but that's what we like around here. Keep them hot, especially on this cold day, because it's like minus 20 outside my door right now. So the hot take feels even hotter in contrast. Dave Zyron, you in or out on Canada moving up the medal table from third?
Oh, I'm all the way in. I mean, their snowboarding team looks good. I like who they have. They were very young last time around. There are a lot of these ancillary sports that Canada thrives in. And I call them ancillary because they are on the broad sports landscape, but this is their time to shine. And I think they're going to do it in Beijing. I like Canada at number 2 with a bullet.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and more unanimity, mainly because we've seen Canada like get into the Summer Olympics and improve their medal output there. And those are the sports that Canada like traditionally isn't necessarily good in, a lot of these sports. Winter Olympics, like these are sports that Canadians already know how to win. They already know, we as a country already know best practices. We as a country already have expectations. So even like one medal that Canada always just automatically puts up on the board is Kaylee Humphries in bobsled. She has switched. She's moved to the U.S. She's competing for the U.S. now as a driver in the 2 women bobsled and also the monobob. But Canada has like more people, like Cynthia Appiah from Toronto. She used to be a thrower at York University. And now she's a bobsled. I think she was pushing a bobsled for a while, but now she's a driver. Now she drives a monobob. She's a medal contender. So this is like part of what Canada has in winter sports that it hasn't always had in summer sports is just depth. And again, expectation and expertise. So Canada should be up there with Norway, Canada, Norway. And then we'll see who's third. But I'm with you two. Canada climbs. There's not much more room to improve on the Winter Olympic medal table, but I think Canada this time does it. And imagine how well they would do in a Winter Olympics with like actual cold weather and real snow. Unstoppable. But we'll get to it. When opening ceremonies, I want to say, are February 3rd. We'll be there and we'll be with you throughout the Olympics, providing our commentary, Meg McPeak's blazing hot snow melting takes. So
fake snow melting.
Right. And exactly. So what we lack in like nuance and expertise, we compensate for with heat. We're like that pitcher that we're like the closer that pitches the last inning. Ask me to paint the corners. I throw 104. That's what I do. And that's what we do on this show. We keep it hot every week. I know between now and next week, Megan, the people are going to get to miss you. So tell the folks where to find you.
As always, on the Twitterverse at Megan McPeak, spelled with an H because it is the correct way to do it.
Yes. And also like on the broadcast of literally any team playing basketball in Washington, D.C., Megan McPeak is, I'm sure, doing play-by-play, pro, amateur, daytime, midnight league. She's there. Men's league, women's league, kids league. She's there. Dave Zyron, between now and next week, tell the folks where to find you.
I'll be in Aaron Rodgers' compound brooding about why the world has been so mean to a modern day prophet that is Aaron Rodgers. No, I'm just kidding. All around. I'm just kidding. You can find me on Twitter at Edge of Sports.
It is amazing how the woke mob mobilized to limit the Green Bay Packers to 58 yards in the second half of that game.
It's like a Cooper Cup bubble screen.
It's not Aaron Rodgers' fault. Clearly, it's everybody else's for not being as smart as he is.
Yes.
That's all it is. Being silenced in a 30-minute interview with ESPN. It then gets aggregated across the whole internet. He's being silenced. All right, let me stop. As for me, you can find me on Twitter and on Instagram at Morgan P. Campbell. Don't look for me on Facebook, Triller, TikTok, or any of these other platforms. I'm a 2.5 platform person. I'm on LinkedIn too, but that's something different. Twitter, Instagram at Morgan P. Campbell. You can like, subscribe, comment, hit us up on social media using the Bring It In hashtag. Send us your in or out topic requests. Megan, why is all of this engagement so important?
Because we have to keep the algorithm fed.
Feed the algorithm like these snowfalls are feeding the snow plows and snow blowers in my neighborhood right now. You got to keep the algorithm fed until next week. And the algorithm is hungry. It's going to keep eating. So we got to keep feeding it. So until next week, she's been Megan McPeak. He's been Dave Zirin. I've been Morgan Campbell, your host on Bringing It In with Morgan Campbell. We will see you guys early next week.